Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another surgical tech video. I'm Shri. If you are new, welcome here. If not, welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about probably a really highly requested video. People always ask me, whether it's on here or on TikTok, what books I used during surgical tech school or what were my study methods. So today I'm going to share with you guys all the books that I have available still and books that I used during my program. I don't have all of them available anymore, but I do have the main basic books that were part of my surgical tech program. So I'm going to go into them and then also touch base a little bit on how I studied for my boards and what it was like. So to get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. I post a lot of surgical tech related content here, and I will be linking each of them throughout this video, so you guys can go ahead and look at my previous videos. For those of you who don't know, I have been a surgical tech now for 2 years. Started out at a big hospital, and now I have gone over to specializing in plastic surgery. So yeah, let's get into the video. So one of the first books that I want to touch base on, all these books were recommended to me by my program. So you get a book list in school and you got to buy all these books and all this stuff. I got most of these books from Amazon or from local bookstore that was linked with my college. And to answer a frequently asked question, I went to school in Boston. The school that I went to was Quincy College, which at the time was a certificate program. I believe that now that program has now transformed into a 2-year associate's degree program. A lot of programs right now are phasing out their certificate programs. A lot of schools are phasing out their certificate program and are looking to go into more of the associate's degree route. So I think a lot of hospitals are going to be requiring that, but as of right now, I still think that there are some schools that still offer the 10-month certificate programs. I get that question a lot, and I also get people always ask me, how do I become a surgical tech? What's the first step that I do? And my first thing to always tell everyone is the first thing you could do is look for a program. If it's what you really want to do and you really want to be a surgical tech, the first thing you have to do is just research what programs are available in your area. If there's any school or colleges that offer surgical tech programs, that is your first step, because you cannot be a surgical tech without going to school. So that's going to be your first step. So regardless of anything else, that is the number one thing you want to do first and foremost, is research programs. Make sure they are accredited, because that's one of the most important things, to make sure your programs are accredited and they are nationally certified as well. So let's get into the main point of this video. So the very first book that I had here, this was my main book. So my program was sectioned into 2 halves. So the first half we did the didactic portion and lab portions, and then they sent us out to clinicals. But we used this book the most. This was the surgical technology. So this is the study guide that accompanies the surgical technology for the surgical technologists. So this was my study guide version of this book. And then the main book, I believe I just had it as a ebook. So I had the ebook, and then I brought an actual hardcover book for my study guide, because the study guide has a lot of case studies in here. It has a lot of exercises and things like that your program instructor might give you homework from that. And so it's really important to get the study guide as a hard copy book. I went to school during COVID, so that's why I could get away with having a ebook. So most of my classes were online. But don't be mistaken for the fact that I still had to go in on campus 2 days a week for my actual lab classes. So because I know some people are asking if there are any online programs out there. No, that's not a good idea. You need to be in a physical program. Only because of COVID, my classes were online. The didactic classes were online, but I still was required to go on campus 2 days a week to do my lab portion of classes. So this, like I said, is the main book that we use throughout the entire program, and I'm gonna go through some pages in here. So let's go through give you guys an idea of what this book has. So this book covers things like Introduction to Surgical Technology, Principles and Practices of Surgical Technology, Surgical Procedures, which involves all the specialties that you can think of. It touch bases on all the surgical procedures and the different surgical specialties. And then it also talks about like instrumentation, how to load and pass sutures, all that good stuff. Like everything is literally in this book. It has a ton of skill assessments in here, which were actually something that we would get. My cat right now. Girl, can I help you? It has case studies in here, so you'll see stuff like this in this book. So it will have case studies and all that stuff. As you can see, I didn't end up going through this entire book, but it's really a helpful book to have. But you will find like short answer questions in here that you actually had to put, like matching diagnosis, short answer questions, like things like this. It's a workbook, right? So when you think of a workbook, this is what you're gonna find in this book. And like I said, this book accompanies your actual surgical technologies main book that I had in the program. So this was the main book. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a study guide. It has a bunch of questions in there and it's a workbook. So that accompanies it. Obviously the actual main book just has the chapters and things like that for you to read on. So we would get reading, and then we would have to go and do a study guide, and basically like short answer questions and answer questions from what we have been reading. That was the main book of the program. A lot of people, I posted this on TikTok, a lot of people said their program uses it. So if your program does not have this book, that's a red flag, because this book is the book. The second book that I had, so that was the main surgical tech book. So like courses we covered were like surgical tech 1, 2, and 3. So it was like the program was split into 3 different like sections. So we would have surgical 1, 2, and 3. We used that book throughout all 3 phases. And then we had courses like microbiology, A&P, and pharmacology, and all those books were separate that I had to buy as well. I don't have those anymore because I rented those and gave them back. But in terms of surgical technology, the second book here that we have, and this was very helpful for the exam study. So this is the Lane Surgical Technology Examination Q&A book. This is a comprehensive review for the surgical technology exam. It gives 1,900 plus exam style Q&As with detailed answers and explanation. So there's nothing like getting a question wrong and not knowing why you got the question wrong or why the answer is correct. This book goes over into detailed why the answer is correct, basically. So the contents in this book cover medical terminology, microbiology, pharmacology and anesthesia, blood values, aseptic technique, sterilization and disinfection. It also talks about the operating room environments, and then it goes over counts, transportation and positioning the patient, specimens, diagnostic procedures, consents, like everything that could potentially be on your boards. This book is going to cover it. And then it goes over in detailed the different surgical specialties that you can think of, like every single one of them. So yeah, it has questions in here, just as how you will see the questions pop up on your board exam. So like that, this is what this book looks like. And then for when you are done with it and it gives you your answer sheet, I want to show you guys what that looks like. So like I said, it gives you answers and explanations on this page. So it gives you a little rundown as to why the answer was the correct answer. So that was also a really good book. I started using this book like pretty early on during the program. I would say as soon as you have access to these books, start doing the practice exams. You can never take too many practice exams. Like, my advice on how to study for the exam is to take as many practice tests from different books as much as possible. Like, whether that's Board Vitals, which is also an online app that my professor used. A lot of people talk about Board Vitals as well, but basically my professor had an app called Board Vital. They used the app called Board Vitals, and he would put in questions in there that were very similar to the exam. So as soon as you get access to that stuff, I would just start taking as many practice tests as you possibly can, because why not? Because that way, the earlier you start, the better you'll have an understanding of how the questions are going to be worded, what kind of questions you might run into. It's just as easier, and it's better to take different questions from different books, because you have different ways of how a question or a question is going to be worded. So I would definitely recommend just start taking as many practice tests as you can as early as possible. The second book that helped with practice exams and questions and helping me study for the boards, Surgical Technologist Certifying Exam Study Guide. And this was given to us by the Association of Surgical Technology. It also comes with a CD. I don't think I ever used the CD. It's still pasted at the back of this book. But it has a CD with, I guess, bonus practice exam. It's weird that it's on a CD, but hey. This book has 6 practice exams with 175 questions. It has more than 1,000 practice questions, 330 basic science review questions. So the book is going to give, the first chapter in this book covers in detail what it's like taking the CST exam. So that's a really good thing for you to read and get familiar with how they're going to be wording, like how they're going to be setting up the exam, what kind of, it goes over, what is the certification, why is certification important, who creates a certification exam. So it goes over that. It goes over about the format of the certification exam, which is that's super important to know. So the format of the examination is composed of 200 multiple choice questions with 4 possible answers. There is only, of course, 1 correct answer for each questions. And then out of the 200 questions, only 175 are scored. 25 are usually just randomly distributed throughout the exam. And that's just for like tests and research questions, basically. And they're randomly distributed, so you don't know what they're going to be. You'll have 4 hours to complete the exam. You may take a break whenever you wish, but you will not be given additional time to make up for the time lost during breaks. You'll have 240 minutes to take the exams. So it goes over just like how to prepare yourself for the exam, basically, which is, I would read that in depth because it's super important to know how you're taking the exam. So, and then the NBS TSA states that the minimum number of questions one must answer to pass the national certification exam is 118. So it's 200 questions, however, only 175 count, and then out of that 175, your passing number has to be 118. Very important for you to know. It goes over whether or not the exam is predictable, how to prepare for the exam, the study guide, and it talks about the candidate handbook, which is published annually each year. So if you're starting your new program, you might want to get the book that's... What is my cat doing? Hold on now. Is she out here being crazy? Yes, so each year there's a new handbook that's going to be published by the NBSTSA, which is another valuable resource for preparing for the exam. The candidate handbook provides general information about eligibility, test preparation, and exam scheduling. So you're going to want to know how you're going to schedule your exam and all that good stuff. And then chapter 2 talks about like reading techniques and things like that. How to, read through a question, how to the skim and scan technique, using reading cues. And then chapter 3 goes over comprehension and retention techniques, so how you're going to be able to like retain the information that you're studying. So these are really important books for you to know. I think I thoroughly read through this book specifically because like a lot of people, you get nervous taking exams and things like that. I'm terrible at taking exams. I get nervous. So I read through this book probably multiple times just to like get a really good understanding of how this was probably one of the biggest tests I had taken in a while. Like I hadn't been in school for a while, so this is super important for me. And then my cat is so funny. It talks about, you know, studying material, like the technical materials, like things you would use to study, and then it goes straight into practice exam number 1. Like it says, it has 6 practice exams. I think this is a good book. This is literally what your exam's gonna look like, except only one question comes up on the screen at a time when you're taking your exam. But this is precisely how it's gonna be set up when you go to take your exam. Like this is how it's gonna look. It's just one question on the screen at a time though. But if they do ask like a picture question like this, it's gonna show up just like that. So this is also a pretty good book to have. I just, you know, I held on to these books because I just thought they were good books to keep. And then, I don't know, I was like, I'm gonna keep the books just in case there's like a year where I don't want to do continuing credits to renew my license and I'll just go sit the exam again. I don't think I'll ever do that, but good thinking. Okay, so those are the only books that I have left that were in regards to those are really the only books that I got that were in regards to how to prepare for exam and exam taking questions and things like that. So apart from that, another couple books that I got from my program. Number 1 favorite book that I have, and I talk about this book all the time to everyone that's in a surgical tech program or reaches out to me, this book right here. And I've talked about this on this channel before. This is my all-time favorite book. When I first started my job, even before I started my job, when I started clinicals, my goodness, when I started clinicals, this book stayed on me because you don't learn everything in school, especially when you do a 10-month program. It goes by super fast. You're not going to be able to cover everything, so you need to prepare yourself for clinicals. And this was one of the ways that I would prepare myself for clinical. I would look up, if you're able to like pick your cases and see your cases the day before you go in, it's helpful to either look up your case, see what it is about, and see how to do the case, right? What is the procedure? This book is really helpful because it quite literally has just about it doesn't have every surgical procedure, but it has almost every surgical procedure. I mean, I'm gonna give you guys an example here. Let's talk about GYN surgery. It literally goes over certain procedures in here are gonna be vaginal hysterectomy, which is like a very common surgery, uterine myomectomy, total abdominal hysterectomy, oophorectomy. It talks about hysteroscopy, surgery for ectopic pregnancy. These are surgeries that you're going to come across a lot working in a hospital. You hear these names all the time. So for plastic surgery, it goes over skin grafting, reduction of a nasal fracture. It talks about a rhinoplasty, BLEP is in here, otoplasty. Like every case that you can think of. There's cases in here that I've never still haven't even heard of, and I worked at a level 1 trauma hospital. Yeah. For neck surgery, it talks about thyroidectomy, parathyroidectomy, and then it literally will go into detail. So I'll give you an example. A right hemicolectomy. So this is it gives you a definition of what that is, which a right hemicolectomy is a resection of the right half of the colon. It goes into a discussion about, the indications for why someone would need to have a hemicolectomy, and that includes, tumors, bleeding, inflammation, or trauma, an obstruction. And then it talks about the procedure. So when I say it talks about the procedure, it kind of gives you a rundown of like the most basic overview of what's going to happen, right? So it talks about what type of incision is going to be made, what structure is going to be ligated, what type of staplers they might use in there, how the anastomosis might go. It goes like into detail, I'm telling you. And then it even, Luna, oh my god, this is what, get out of there, out. Mommy is trying to make a video. Guys, do you guys see her? Giving me all these troubles. Giving me all these troubles. Go. Please, go. You just want attention, don't you? Okay. So, it goes over how to prep the patient, skin preparation, what they're going to use to drape. It literally says folded towels and a laparotomy sheet, which is spot on. Equipments, like it tells you you're going to need suction, you're going to need a Bovie, and then it goes over instrumentation, what trays you might potentially open, a major abdominal tray, long instrument trays, hemoclip appliers, what type of retractors you might need, the supplies you might need, and supplies like what blades, the Bovie pencil, everything. Like, it's literally gives you a rundown of everything that you might possibly need. Again, a lot of surgeries is surgeon's preferences, but if you have a general idea, you're golden. So this book would stay in my locker at work because it comes in handy. I've used this book hundreds of cases where I was like, oh, I don't really know what that is, or I haven't scrubbed it in a while. This book I recommend. Like, I when I first started working my first job, had this at work. I left it in the operating room. Someone stole it, and I went back on Amazon and I paid $70-something for this book because I thought it was such a good book to have. Like, yes, you can Google it, whatever, go on YouTube. I really like having this book. I really, really like having this book. So I 100% recommend getting this book when you're starting out clinicals or starting a new job. But this is a book to have. If your program does not recommend you this book, that's a red flag. All right, 2 more books to talk about, and they're kind of the same little pocket guide books. This is Pocket Guide to Anatomy and Physiology. Really good book to have. You need to know your anatomy. Anatomy is really hard to learn. But it's good to have a basic idea of what your structures are. You need to know where fascia is. You need to know subacute. You need to know basic anatomy to be able to pick up and be able to anticipate what the surgeon's doing. You need to know, should I put up the bigger Richardson retractor at this point because they're about to be deeper? You know what I mean? Like, basic stuff to start out is super important. So I'd recommend getting a book like this, or even an app. I recommend, like, I used to use an app, I forgot what it's called, but it's probably one of those, and you just type in anatomy and physiology in the app store and it'll pop up a bunch, and you can literally just download any of them and like do anatomy quizzes and things like that, and like play games to learn your anatomy. You're gonna be scrubbing stuff like vascular surgery. It's super important to know. And listening to, like, if you're at a teaching hospital sometimes too, I would listen to, the surgeons talking to their the med student or even the resident and ask them questions like, oh, what arteries right there, or what structure is right there. And that's also a good way to learn. And just asking questions, like if you've never seen a specific, you don't know some specifics, asking questions is always a good way to go. Don't feel bad for not knowing. You didn't go to med school. You didn't even get the 10 years, you know what I mean? So don't be afraid to ask questions. But this is a good book. This is by Shirley A. Jones. And I think I got this at Barnes and Noble, but I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon as well. And this was a rental return. Wow. I was supposed to return this book. That's nice. Anyway, the next little guidebook that I have, this is called Surgical Notes. And this is pretty much, it says a pocket survival guide for the operating room. This goes over, it goes over A&P as well. It goes over setting up, meds, instruments, sutures. Not super in depth, just like the basics, but it's also a pretty little cool book to have. It also talks about sutures. It talks about how to prep your patient, and it talks about different dynamics, you know, how to communicate in the operating room, and, you know, conflicts in the OR. You know, as though I talked about that in a previous video. It talks about bullying. Yeah, so this is also a pretty good book to use. It also has a section here for like notes and stuff, like writing about your surgeries and things like that. So another good book to have. Those are the only books that I have left from my program, but they were vital books that were super helpful in preparing me for the surgical tech world. Again, your program will give you a list of books that they want you to have, and you can either, like, I just decided I would keep a lot of these books because I just thought it was helpful. But yeah, that's pretty much the books that I have. In regards to studying, like I said, studying for the exam, like I said, you know, start taking as much practice tests as you can, as early as you can. That's the best way to prepare yourself for the exam. It gives you the earlier you start, then the faster you'll be able to start eliminating, like, and realizing your weak areas, like what section you need to focus on. But you'll start realizing like what your weaknesses are, and then you will focus on what those are. So like when you get like tests at school and things like that, just keep your papers and start remembering like what your weak areas are, and then focus on those areas. And then I would also, one of the things that I did too was like decide like what days I would focus on specific topics. Like there was a day that I would like, okay, today I'm gonna do microbiology for a couple hours, and then I'm gonna touch on like pharmacology for a few hours. So break it up into parts. And then when you get into surgical specialties and things like that, break that up as well. So like figure out like 1 week you'll touch on like GYN surgery or in ortho, and like you pick like 3 specialties that you want to focus on at a time and start learning those specialties. And then you pick like 3 major topics. Like let's say you decide to study sterilization and instrumentation or something, like, but break it up. Like don't try to go all in at once. Like try to break up into like section, like days, like you want to focus on specific topics, group that together, and then the next day you cover 2 other topics. But don't overwhelm yourself by trying to figure out everything all at once. You will crash and burn. There was another book that I thought was really, really helpful, but I think I returned that book, but it was an instrumentation book that was super helpful. It had all the instruments in there. Sometimes I realized too, is like seeing something on picture is not the same as seeing something in your hand. So I would just say, like, as long as you know your major abdominal tray, you're gonna be okay, because you're gonna see a lot of the trays are going to have repeat instruments in them. So like your stringer instruments that are gonna be, they're all gonna be the same in your basic trays. So even if it's like ENT and stuff, you're always gonna see like a tonsil, Alice, or a Kelly. You're probably gonna see those stringers like in every tray. It's more so like when you go into like ortho, which is a completely different ball game. There's a lot of loaner trays in ortho, and they come from loaners, so like outside of the hospital. So there's gonna be stuff that you've never seen before, so don't even worry about it. But like I said, like, you have your basic instruments that are always going to be on a set, and then it's just based off the specialty. Certain things will be added to that tray, basically. So as long as you know your basic instruments, so if you know your major ABD, I know by the time I was done working at my trauma center, I could count my major ABD. When I would count my major ABD, I'd be like Alice 1 2 3. Like I would know the stringer. Like I could close my eyes and count my stringer because I would just know it off the, like, I could literally close my eyes and count the major ABD at this point in time. Like, you asked me to count a major ABD right now, I can count it. I can tell you exactly what's in that tray. You asked me to count a book watcher, I'll know exactly what's in that tray, because you're always going to see those trays. And this is why it's important to start out at a hospital before wanting to specialize. So you might find that you liked something specific in clinicals. Don't try to go and specialize right after clinicals. Don't do it to yourself. You're gonna set yourself up for failure, because if anything were to happen where you found out that you didn't actually really like the service as much as you thought, and then you wanted to switch back into a major hospital, it's gonna be really hard for you to pick things up. I would definitely recommend just starting out into a big hospital where you learn how to scrub every single case there is, and then you can specialize after 2 years, 3 years, whatever. But make sure you start in a major hospital so you can learn everything, and your brain will be filled with all these beautiful, amazing things, and you'll be able to do everything and then specialize. But that's it. Yeah, like I said, the only really valid advice that I have for studying for the exam is cutting it up into sections, start taking it as early as possible, and then start marking and recording your answers that you keep getting incorrectly, and focus on those areas, focus on your weak areas, but start taking as much practice questions as you can as early as possible. That's the best advice that I can give you. But that is it for this video. I really hope it was helpful. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me them in the description box, in the comment section below. And don't forget to follow me on TikTok. I post at least once a week. I'll try to post a day in my life as a surgical tech, and I'm posting about plastic surgery now because that's what I'm working in. But yeah, don't forget to follow me on my socials and like, comment this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Welcome to the family. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.